Hello guys, welcome to Dr. Nightstare. I know you guys come here to relax and take a nap. So before we go, please hit like and subscribe. By the way, also tell me what time and where you guys listening from. Alright then. No sound rose from the cobbled streets of Paris in the year 1620. The great city ceased its bustling life, gripped by the pestilence. I walked through this desolation, my figure a solitary mark against the empty buildings. My long waxed coat and the beaked mask I wore proclaimed my grim profession to all who saw me. My presence confirmed the final truth. Death had claimed another home, another family, another life. I moved like a phantom along the empty avenues, an omen of finality and dread. Residents peered from behind shuttered windows, their faces contorted with stark fear when they glimpsed my tall, dark silhouette. I was the harbinger, the one who brought no comfort but only the stark reality of their inescapable doom. I observed the city's agony with a calm, professional distance. Each wheezing breath, each fevered tremor, I noted with clinical precision in my mind. The pervasive suffering did not touch my thoughts. It was merely a field of study. I simply marked the fallen, a silent recorder in a dying city. I knew I was a feared figure, but their fear was simply a symptom of their disease, not an emotion I acknowledged within myself. I merely existed to count the dead. I moved from one deserted street to another, guided by the familiar morbid path that marked the plague's progress. I approached a house whose door stood slightly ajar, a common sign of recent death. Inside, the air hung still and cold, bearing the smell of illness and decay. I found the man, a baker by his clothing, lying across his bed, his skin already mottled, and performed the swift examination, confirming what I already knew. Another entry for my ledger awaited. As I turned to leave, I saw a small chest of dark wood on a nearby table. Symbols I did not know were carved into its surface. On top of the chest rested a small object. It was a mask. Bone formed its shape, intricately carved to resemble a human face with hollow eyes and an open mouth. Its surface appeared ancient, and a distinct warmth radiated from it, defying the room's chill. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the surface. It felt smooth and hard. An undeniable current passed into my hand, and I felt a pull I could not explain. I felt a compelling urge to possess it. This sensation went beyond mere interest. I picked it up, feeling its strange heat against my palm. I told myself it was simply an antique. This antique would make a unique specimen from my collection of morbid curiosities. Such artifacts held historical value. I secured it within my coat, and its warmth pressed against my side as I resumed my grim rounds. I arrived back at my quarters within the hospital walls. The bone mask still radiated its strange warmth through the fabric of my coat. I removed the mask from its hidden place. It glowed with a soft red light. The light pulsed from its hollow eyes, then from its open mouth. The entire bone surface began to emit this crimson beat. I stared at it. An urge to place it on my face became too strong to resist. I lifted it and fitted it over my own features. The walls of my room dissolved into nothingness. The floor beneath my feet vanished. I stood on air in a vast, cold expanse. The light from the mask was the only illumination. The crimson glow pulsed around me. Shapes began to form in the distant gloom. They were the suffering forms of those I had left behind. Their faces contorted, their bodies twisted. They did not scream, but I felt their anguish. A voice spoke then. It was my own voice, yet it echoed with a terrible judgment. "You linger among them," the voice accused. "You watch their final struggles too long. You savor each rasping breath. You observe the onset of death with a hungry interest." The words pierced through my careful defenses. I felt a sudden heat rise in my chest. The vast chamber pressed in on me. "You find pleasure in the power you hold," the voice continued. "You choose who receives what meager comfort the hospital offers. You decide who lives long enough to become a subject for your studies. You decide who simply dies." The truth of those words struck me. I felt the weight of them. The bone mask tightened on my face. Its heat grew almost unbearable. The red light intensified. I tried to deny it. I tried to push the accusations away. But the voice intensified. It demanded my full admission. The suffering forms around me seemed to lean closer, their silent agony amplifying the voice's power. A confession tore from my throat. "Yes," I whispered. My own voice, amplified by the mask, boomed back at me. "I linger. I find a strange satisfaction in the observation of their decline. I do feel a cruel power. I have chosen who lived and who died for my own curiosity." The words hung in the crimson air. The forms around me seemed to recede. The mask's judgment was complete. The crimson light receded from the air. The suffocating heat vanished from my face, and my room solidified around me. My hands felt empty, the bone mask no longer present. A sudden tremor shook my body, an uncontrollable shiver that rattled my teeth. A searing pain erupted deep in my groin. Then another, a hot spike in my armpit. My chest ached with a throbbing pressure, each beat of my heart a painful echo. My breath became shallow, then ragged. My vision blurred, dark spots dancing at the edges of my sight. The sickness, the very plague I had merely recorded in others, now seized my own flesh with a brutal grip. My careful distance shattered instantly. I was no longer the detached observer, the phantom of death. I was the patient, the victim. The suffering I had catalogued, the pain I had studied with such clinical detachment, now consumed me entirely. I finally understood the agonizing meaning of their torment. I caught my reflection in every surface, a habit ingrained since childhood. The polished chrome of the toaster, the darkened television screen, the glass of the picture frame on the hallway table, each offered a momentary glimpse of my face. I would pause, just a breath, to adjust my hair or straighten my shirt, seeking reassurance in the image staring back. It felt like a necessary ritual, a quick check that the world still approved of the person it saw. My mother often watched me from the kitchen, shaking her head with a small smile. "Always checking yourself, Leo," she would say, her voice carrying a warmth that softened the implied criticism. "There's more to life than what's in the mirror." I usually just shrugged, offering a casual smile in return. I knew she meant well, but I never truly heard her words. The validation I sought felt real and immediate, a constant affirmation I could not do without. The world outside often felt a bit chaotic, but my own image always provided a sense of control and calm. Later that afternoon, the usual sense of calm shattered. Mark and I had been talking in the park, the conversation drifting aimlessly as it always did. He suddenly squinted at me, a casual, almost dismissive look on his face. "You know, Leo, you really ought to get more sleep," he said, without malice, just simple observation. "You've got these dark circles under your eyes. You look a bit tired, actually." His words hit me with an unexpected force. They burrowed deep, dismantling the careful image I had constructed for myself that day, for every day. Dark circles? Tired? The thought coiled in my stomach, a sudden, sickening knot. I tried to dismiss it, to laugh it off, but the casual remark had already done its damage. I barely registered the rest of our conversation. His words replayed in my mind on the walk home, each repetition amplifying the perceived flaw. The moment I stepped through my front door, I headed straight for the bathroom. not even bothering to greet my mother. I flipped on the harsh overhead light and leaned close to the large mirror above the sink. My eyes scrutinized every inch of my face, searching for the evidence of Mark's careless assessment. Was it true? Did I really look tired? I pulled at the skin beneath my eyes, tilting my head left, then right. The reflection seemed to confirm his words, dark smudges appearing more prominent with each anxious moment I spent staring. A wave of dread washed over me, a desperate need to fix what felt fundamentally broken. I spent a long time there, lost in the critical examination, utterly consumed by the image in front of me. I remained in the bathroom, the harsh overhead light casting stark shadows that seemed to emphasize every perceived flaw on my face. The image in the mirror was unwavering, confirming my worst fears. The dark circles under my eyes truly did mar my appearance, a stark betrayal of the perfect illusion I tried to maintain. My friend's casual words, "You look a bit tired," echoed, magnified by the late hour and my growing despair. I leaned closer, pressing my forehead against the cool glass, desperate for a different outcome, for a shift in the reflection's weary gaze. I just wanted the tired eyes to vanish, to disappear and leave behind the confident self I remembered, unblemished. As I stared, a thought, cold and clear, formed in my mind. My bother. It is already done. The words formed with unnerving clarity, a direct answer to my silent wish. I recoiled from the mirror, a sudden chill creeping down my spine. Had I imagined it? Was my exhaustion finally twisting my mind? My heart thumped against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the sudden fear. Then a sound. A soft, dismissive sigh rose from the glass. My reflection's lips did not move, but the distinct utterance, barely perceptible, resonated. It spoke directly to the dread churning in my stomach. I gripped the sink counter, knuckles white. This could not be real. This had to be a trick of my mind, a symptom of the intense pressure and lack of sleep. I stood there, trembling, trying to convince myself of my own sanity. I spun away from the mirror, not daring to look back at the unchanging image. I stumbled out of the bathroom, leaving the light on, and practically fell into bed. Sleep did not come easily. The phantom whisper, the disembodied sigh, lingered like a cold presence at the edges of my awareness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection, its silent gaze, and heard that strange sound echoing in my head. The idea of waking tomorrow, of facing that mirror again, filled me with a sickening dread that remained. I woke to whispers. They came not from within my head, but from the room itself. They crawled from the darkened window pane, from the glossy surface of my bedside table, from the polished wooden frame of a picture on the wall. Sharp words I could not discern, yet their intent felt clear, a mocking undercurrent that stung me. My heart pounded against my ribs, beating frantically against the sudden, impossible sound. I sat bolt upright, my eyes darting around the room. The whispers seemed to recede into the surfaces, but their chilling presence lingered, a cold awareness that settled in my bones. Every reflective surface in the room felt suddenly alive, each surface now a watching point. The full-length mirror in the wardrobe, the glass on my desk, the metallic base of my lamp. They all held a cold, expectant glint, promising further torment if I dared to look away. A desperate anger propelled me from the bed. I stumbled towards the full-length mirror embedded in my wardrobe door. It was the source of my dread, the largest of the reflective surfaces now tormenting me. My breath hitched as I approached, my own face staring back, distorted by a new fear. The reflection's eyes held a challenging glint. It offered a silent dare. I pressed my palm flat against the cool glass, my reflection doing the same. its lips twisted into a cruel smile, wider than my own. Then its hand moved, not matching mine but grasping my wrist with sudden, impossible force. A sharp tug pulled at my arm. My fingers slipped on the glass, a frantic scraping sound. The entire mirror rippled, losing its solid surface, becoming a sudden, yielding void. I felt a strong suction, a powerful, inescapable drag that pulled me forward, through the shimmering plane. There was no pain, only an overwhelming pull that tore at my being, stretching me thin. The world spun, a dizzying rush of light and dark, an instant of utter disorientation. A cold shock enveloped me, a sudden reshaping. My breath was stolen from my lungs. Then, with a jarring jolt, it was over. I stood, pressed against something unseen and cold, looking out. My room was before me, but it felt distant and unreachable, separated by an invisible barrier. My doppelganger, my own face, stood where I had just been, adjusting its shirt with a deliberate movement. It turned towards the door just as my mother opened it, her face etched with concern. "Leo? Are you all right, dear?" I heard a noise. My doppelganger offered a reassuring smile. "Just getting ready, Mom. Everything is fine." The words, my words, sounded normal, delivered with a casual ease that my own terrified lungs could never manage. I watched, trapped, as my imposter walked past her, exiting the room, leaving me alone on the other side of the glass. The unseen barrier held me, rigid and unyielding. My room stretched out before me, distant and unreachable. I saw everything through the glass, yet could touch nothing. My breath did not fog the invisible pain. No air moved in this desolate space. No sound reached my ears. Only the cold, hard reality of my confinement existed. My doppelganger, wearing my face, moved with horrifying ease. It walked to my bed, sat on the edge, and picked up a book, flipping through the pages. This casual gesture struck me with raw helplessness. This was my life, being lived by a stranger. This was my prison. I watched the imposter live my existence. It ate dinner with my mother, laughed at her jokes, and helped her with the dishes. Each interaction brought fresh torment. My mother smiled at it, completely unaware of the monstrous fraud in her home. I screamed silently, my voice a useless echo within my trapped mind. My cold, trembling hands beat against the invisible wall, but it offered no give. Only the reflected image of my own desperate struggle showed on the surface. I held on to one thought, a desperate hope. The imposter, a being of the glass, had no reflection. Surely someone would notice this fundamental truth. My mother, with her discerning eyes, would eventually catch sight of the blank space where its image should be. She would see the deception. This thought sustained me, the only thing keeping total despair at bay. I imagined the moment of discovery, the shock, the terrible realization. Then the larger dread consumed me. What if it was never discovered? What if I remained here, an eternal observer, while my doppelganger enacted some sinister plan? What if it hurt my mother, or twisted my life into something vile? The image of its cruel smile, wider than my own, flashed in my mind. My permanent entrapment, a chilling prospect, mingled with its unknown intentions. I was trapped, a powerless and forgotten presence, watching my life unfold through a pane of glass. I stepped into the house as first light crept across the hallway. My mother, Arlene, stood in the kitchen, back straight. She did not turn when I closed the door. Her presence promised trouble. "You are home early," she said without turning, her voice flat. My skin prickled. "Yes," I replied, my voice tight, heading for the stairs. "Stop," Arlene commanded. I froze. She turned, eyes narrowed, sweeping over me. My denim jacket felt too thin. "What is that?" Arlene pointed at my left sleeve. I looked down. A dark, rusty stain marred the cuff, barely visible but undeniable. "It is nothing," I mumbled, pulling my arm back. "It is not nothing," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "That looks like blood, Sarah." A cold wave washed over me. "I fell," I said, words hollow. I scraped my arm. Arlene stopped in front of me, face grim. "You have been acting strange for weeks," she stated, quiet but firm. "Staying out late, coming home at odd hours. You are withdrawn and distracted." My stomach tightened. They had noticed. "And now this," she gestured to the stain. "You are not telling me the truth." Her gaze was unwavering, filled with deep suspicion that saw through every excuse. It told me she feared something worse, something I could not explain. The morning air felt heavy around us, her questions revolving around the stain, my behavior, my dark secret. I raced up the stairs, leaving my mother's gaze behind, and locked my bedroom door. Adrenaline still surged through me. I walked to the mirror, pulling up my sleeve. The small blood stain on the denim seemed insignificant compared to the deep ache now spreading beneath my skin. My forearm pulsed. Dark tendrils began to spread just below the surface, tracing black paths along my veins. They coiled and twisted up my arm. A grotesque network appeared against my pale skin. A cold power flowed through them. My jaw tightened. I watched the transformation without panic. I focused, pushing the darkness back, feeling the chill recede. The black lines slowly faded, pulling themselves back into the depths of my being. My skin cleared, leaving a lingering coolness and the knowledge of what lay hidden. I could not let anyone discover this. I was making coffee when a soft knock sounded at my door. I pulled it open to see Amy standing on the porch, her expression tight and etched with concern. "Nathan," she began, her voice quiet but carrying an urgent edge, "I truly need to talk to you about Sarah." I stepped back, allowing her to enter, a sense of unease already coiling in my gut before she even spoke another word. "I saw her at Mark's funeral yesterday," Amy continued, her gaze direct and unwavering. "It was unsettling, Nathan." She laughed during the eulogy. It was a real, audible laugh that drew stares from other mourners. It felt out of place. Then, later, when Mrs. Peterson was openly weeping, Sarah just sat there staring intently at her phone screen. She offered no comfort to anyone around her. A cold knot tightened in my stomach at the words. Sarah? At Mark's funeral? My voice dropped low with disbelief and confusion. She told me she had to work late yesterday. She said she had a big project. Amy shook her head slowly. "She was there, Nathan. I saw her speaking to other attendees, chatting as if it were a casual social gathering. She openly complained about the length of the service to anyone who would listen. She even made a flippant remark about Mark's tie. Her behavior was disrespectful, Nathan. Everyone present witnessed her startling lack of empathy throughout the entire event. My mind began to process the image of Sarah, my girlfriend, acting in such a callous, indifferent manner. This detailed account did not match the person I believed her to be. Amy was a straightforward person. She did not invent stories. Her eyes held a genuine, persistent worry that I found impossible to dismiss or ignore. This sudden, unsettling information crashed over me. It compelled me to confront a truth about Sarah I had avoided seeing. The actual character of the woman I loved now felt unknown, shrouded in a new and uncomfortable mystery. A cold feeling settled in my chest as Amy's words about Sarah at the funeral echoed in my mind. I thought about Sarah dismissing my worries for a sick friend, calling my concern melodrama. I had previously pushed that memory aside, explaining it as her practical nature. Then I remembered a time when she insisted on making every decision for our weekend getaway, disregarding my own ideas. She asserted her will in a manner that felt absolute. I could still recall the sharp tone in her voice when I suggested an alternative. Her laughter at the funeral, her disinterest in Mrs. Peterson's deep grief. These were not singular events. They were pieces of a larger design. The truth surfaced now. Sarah often displayed little regard for others' feelings when it was inconvenient for her. She sought control in many situations. The person I loved, the Sarah I believed I knew, shifted into something unfamiliar. An uncomfortable reality began to take hold. Sarah was someone else. Driven by his growing doubts, I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Sarah's name. I pressed call. "Come over," I said when she answered. "We need to talk." Her reply was immediate, clipped. "I know," she said. The sound of her voice sent a shiver through me. The confrontation was coming. The studio light had been too bright, and my students had been too loud. My head throbbed when I finally locked the school door behind me. I slumped onto the couch at home, dropping my bag with a sigh. My eldest, Leo, appeared from the kitchen, a wide grin on his face. He held a folded sheet of paper, his Father's Day gift. I took the drawing from his small hand and smoothed out the creases. The image was a portrait of our living room, rendered with unsettling precision. Every thread of the worn rug, every crack in the paint on the wall, was captured with painstaking exactness. My gaze fixed on the armchair where I sat in the drawing, a hand holding a book, my face smiling. Next to me, the sofa stretched cold and vacant. Thomas was not there. On the carpet beneath my drawn feet was a splash of vivid red. The color possessed a depth, a saturation that looked disturbingly real, almost wet on the paper. This pigment was a shade I knew well from anatomy books, from the occasional accident in the studio. It was the color of blood. My stomach tightened. An unshakable dread settled over me. Something was terribly wrong. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding immediate action. I called Thomas's name, my voice cracking, a desperate plea echoing through the two quiet rooms. I searched everywhere, tearing through his small room, peering under beds, opening every closet door. But I found no trace of him, not even a discarded toy. Leo watched me, his small face a mask of bewilderment. His innocent drawing, still clutched in my hand, felt like a cruel omen, and a chilling certainty solidified into ice in my gut. The police arrived, their questions sterile, their eyes assessing my panic. A missing person report was filed, a cold document that offered no comfort, and the official investigation found nothing. Days bled into weeks, each hour a torment. Posters with Thomas's smiling face went up around the neighborhood, his bright eyes staring out from lampposts and storefronts, but no one reported seeing him. We hired a private detective, a man with tired eyes and a grave demeanor, who took our money and our hope, only to return with apologies and dead ends. Every phone call brought a fresh wave of dread, only to end in crushing disappointment. A year crawled by, marked by the deafening silence of Thomas's absence. My sleep fractured into short, restless stretches filled with phantom cries, and I woke each morning to an oppressive emptiness. Food lost its taste, and my body grew thin, sharp angles replacing the softer curves of a father who once held his sons close. The art studio became a place of torture, the vibrant colors mocking my internal gray landscape. I stopped painting, my hands idle, my creativity withered. I began seeing a therapist because the weight of existence had become too much to bear alone, and I needed someone to help me navigate the ruin of my life. My reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, hollow-eyed and gaunt, someone stripped bare of joy and purpose, a ghost haunting his own home. A year later, the world still moved without Thomas, and I was still a ghost in my own life. Leo came to me again on another Father's Day, holding out a paper with both hands. This new drawing showed our house, but the lines were less precise, the colors softer and less vivid. On the floor, near where I sat in the image, there was a patch of faded red. It lacked the startling intensity of the pigment from his first gift, appearing dull and almost brown against the paper. I folded the drawing carefully, a cold ache settling in my chest. Later that afternoon, I gathered the overflowing trash bags from the kitchen. "Leo, please take these out to the bin," I said, gesturing towards the back door. He hesitated, his small brow furrowed. "No, Dad, I will do it." His voice held a strange urgency. He picked up one bag, then another, his movements stiff and slow. A peculiar, sickeningly sweet odor reached me then, a smell like decay mixed with something metallic. It seemed to come from the direction of the old garden shed, neglected since Thomas disappeared. "What is that smell, Leo?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Leo froze, then dropped the trash bags. He ran to the shed door, his small body pressing against it. "No, Dad, don't go there. It is nothing, just old tools." His eyes, wide and terrified, pleaded with me. A sudden, terrible certainty coiled in my stomach, silencing the protest in his words. I pushed past him, my hand shaking as it reached for the latch. The metal was cold beneath my fingers. The shed door creaked open, revealing a deeper gloom inside. The foul odor intensified, thick and suffocating, stinging my eyes. My breath hitched in my throat. In the far corner, half hidden beneath an old tarp, lay a small, still form. The shape was undeniably human, shrunken and dark, like a twisted relic. It was Thomas, his small body desiccated, his clothes clinging to withered. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. Then the horrifying realization slammed into me, a brutal, bone-shattering blow. The vivid, unsettlingly real red from Leo's first drawing, the color that had haunted my waking thoughts and nightmares for a year, had never been paint. A sharp crack erupted deep within my body, ripping through me with brutal force, and a cold sensation of tearing spread through my being. My limbs locked, and muscles seized with rigidity throughout my form, as a powerful presence within my spine began to shift and strain, compelling my body downwards into a kneeling posture, leaving me paralyzed. From my perception of my own spine, a spectral form began to unfurl. It undulated and pulsed with an impossible intricacy, writhing in the dim space above me. This was an impossible dance I saw with my eyes and felt deep in my bones. The undulating form's foremost point drifted closer to my face, its spectral presence hovering just before my eyes. From its pointed tip, a radiant liquid began to spill, catching the scarce light in the dimness. An undeniable urge spread through my seized body, forcing my jaw to unclench and my mouth to part. A silent command I could not resist. I accepted the cold, radiant offering as it flowed onto my tongue. The liquid was lost memories, a forgotten essence, a familiar awareness that had been buried deep within me for a long time. It crackled with an ancient energy, seeping into my throat and then into my being with an intensity. My vision began to blur, the spectral world around me dissolving into indistinct shapes and colors. The boundaries of my mind started to dissolve, my sense of self fraying at the edges. My conscious thought receded into a hazy current. The spectral spine slowly began its return. It did not pass through my mouth but merged with my core being. Cold tendrils coiled deep within my stomach. An intricate knot took root there, unsettling my core. I was left utterly hollowed, yet an alien presence filled me. It had claimed me. My body was its vessel now, fundamentally altered, bound to its disturbing will. The bar's flashing lights still pulsed behind my eyes as I stumbled into Sarah's apartment. I watched her kick off her shoes, the movement a blur in my peripheral vision. We passed the large hallway mirror. I glanced at our reflections and a sharp jolt went through me. My own face looked haggard. Sarah's image in the glass stood still, her eyes wide and staring straight ahead, completely separate from her moving body. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. When I looked again, her reflection moved normally. She smiled at my words. It had to be the late hour, the cheap drinks, or just my exhausted mind playing tricks. Sarah's still reflection lingered, urging me to scan my surroundings. At the grocery checkout, the young man's reflection in a metallic panel appeared flat, his eyes fixed on me. I looked directly at him. He smiled, completely normal. I paid, a tremor running through me. Later, passing my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Davison, in the park, her reflection in a bus stop shelter glass caught my eye. Her reflected face turned towards me, a knowing smile playing, her gaze following. The real Mrs. Davison just tossed crumbs, oblivious. I angled my phone's dark screen towards the shelter. Her reflection remained locked on me, frozen in that knowing stare, while she moved normally. These bizarre reflections became a pattern. A barista's image, a delivery driver's image. All held my gaze too long, separate from the person's actual movements. Each time, I looked away, then angled my phone to confirm. The reflections were always still, always watching, their eyes fixed on me with a blank intensity. The real people never showed, urging me to search further. The subtle glances escalated from specific moments to an undeniable constant, encompassing my entire day. My landlord paused mid-sentence as I entered the building lobby, his gaze following me across the tiles until I reached the elevator doors. The mail carrier, usually focused on his route with practiced efficiency, now stopped abruptly at my mailbox, his head turned to track my car down the street until it vanished from view. At the coffee shop, the barista would cease grinding beans and preparing drinks, her eyes fixing on me with an unwavering intensity until I ordered and moved away. At work, the familiar office chatter died the moment I walked onto the floor. Colleagues stopped typing, their faces lifting in unison to watch me cross the room to my desk. Every conversation halted upon my entry, only to resume in hushed tones when I passed. Their collective stare, always directed at me, made me the singular focus of a silent, inescapable watch. The collective stares in the office had been a prelude to the grocery store. Fluorescent lights amplified the feeling of being hunted. Every aisle felt like a gauntlet. Shopping carts swerved to keep me in view, their metallic glint catching distorted faces locked on mine. I clutched my cart, knuckles white, trying to focus, but my peripheries were alive with turning heads. I pushed past a fruit display, feeling a prickle on my neck as I saw a flash. My eyes darted to the large freezer door filled with frozen meals. A young mother stood there, her small child in the cart, her body bent, her face animated with a gentle smile. Her reflection in the glass was different. Her reflected face was devoid of expression, her eyes wide and vacant, staring directly into my own with unwavering intensity. It was the same dead stare I had seen, but this time, too close, too open, too undeniable. A ragged sound ripped from my chest, a scream tore through the store. My cart toppled, spilling groceries. Shoppers gasped, recoiled, pulling their children back, their faces twisted with fear. Terrified whispers spread. 2 security guards, burly men, converged on me, hands outstretched, voices sharp. I dragged the heavy couch across the floor, blocking the door. Every window was latched, every curtain drawn tight. My apartment had become a fortress, a futile attempt to keep out what I knew was already everywhere. The frantic scramble to barricade myself had done little to quell the gnawing certainty. Their eyes still watched me, a constant pressure on my skin. I could feel their collective stare even through thick walls, through locked doors. There was no escape from their relentless gaze. I sat at the small kitchen table, staring blankly at my laptop screen. It was off, a dark mirror reflecting the room. My own gaunt face looked back at me, a stranger with wide, desperate eyes. Behind my reflection, where the window should have been clear glass, a thick, white mist clung to the panes. It was not a reflection of condensation from inside. The glass itself looked frosted, completely opaque. A chill crept through me, deeper than the apartment's cold air. I rose slowly, my muscles protesting. I walked to the window, the one I had just seen in the screen's reflection. My hands trembled as I reached for the edge of the heavy curtain. I pulled it back just a fraction, creating a narrow gap. Through the sliver of space, I saw them. Faces, many faces. They were pressed flat against the glass, pale and lifeless. Their eyes were wide, vacant, completely unblinking. They just stood there, a silent, patient multitude, watching me from the other side. They were waiting. My breath hitched. There was nowhere to go. I remember the first week in the new house felt strange, a little off balance. I blamed the relentless moving stress for my constant exhaustion, for the way I jumped at every creak of the old floorboards. My mind played tricks on me in the lengthening evening shadows. I would sometimes glimpse a small shape dart behind the armchair, a fleeting movement I instantly dismissed as my overactive imagination. It was just the pressure, I told myself, the overwhelming task of settling into our new life. One morning, I found a bright red plastic toy truck on the bedroom dresser, out of place among my things. My husband, Thomas, worked long hours and we had no children. I picked it up, confused, then put it away, deciding it was a relic from the previous owners. The following night, he was there. I woke suddenly, not from a noise but from an intense sensation of being watched. My eyes adjusted to the dim room, and I saw him standing beside our bed. He was a small boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, dressed in old-fashioned pajamas, his face pale and utterly still. He just stood there, his dark eyes fixed on me without expression. I held my breath, terrified to move, convinced I was caught in a particularly vivid dream. He did not move, did not breathe, just watched me without blinking. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to rationalize. It was a nightmare brought on by sleep deprivation. I tried to tell Thomas over breakfast, "I think I had a really bad nightmare last night about a child in our room." He smiled patiently. "Moving stress, sweetheart. You're overtired. It'll pass." His easy dismissal felt like a physical barrier between us. He did not understand the dread that had started to coil in my stomach. The incidents continued. I heard footsteps on the landing when Thomas was at work. Doors I had closed were later found ajar. The boy reappeared each time by the bed, watching me, silent. I stopped mentioning it to Thomas, knowing his reassurances would only deepen my isolation. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, a product of my stretched nerves, but that conviction weakened with each passing night, replaced by a growing terror I could not explain away. I accepted Sarah's invitation for coffee one Tuesday afternoon, grateful for the distraction from the house. Thomas's sister lived in a cozy bungalow overflowing with family mementos. We chatted about the move and her recent garden project. Sarah then pulled out a large, worn photo album from a shelf near the sofa. "I was looking through these yesterday," she said, opening the thick cover. "So many memories." She flipped through pages filled with faded photographs documenting their childhood. I politely admired the pictures, commenting on the fashion and the places, trying to keep my mind off the things waiting for me at home. Then, my breath caught in my throat. A single photograph dominated one page. It showed a small boy, no older than 5, sitting on a tricycle in a sunlit garden. He had dark hair and dark eyes, a solemn expression on his face. He held a bright red plastic toy truck in his small hand. My hand trembled as I pointed a finger at the image. "Who is this boy?" My voice came out thin, barely a whisper. Sarah leaned closer, her smile still warm. "That's Thomas when he was just a little one. He loved that red truck more than anything, carried it everywhere." The world spun around me, and the pleasant chatter of the room receded. The boy in the photograph was identical to the spectral child who stood by my bed each night. The same dark hair, the same dark eyes, the same unnerving stillness in his gaze. And the truck, the very red toy I had found on my dresser weeks ago, was clutched in his small hand. This was Thomas. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The terror I felt each night transformed into something deeply personal and utterly inexplicable. This was real, a horrifying truth tied directly to my husband. My perception of the unsettling occurrences dissolved completely, replaced by a cold, inescapable dread. I closed my eyes for a moment, but the image of the boy, of Thomas, clutching the red truck, burned behind my eyelids, demanding recognition. I drove home from Sarah's house in a daze. The image of young Thomas holding that red truck burned behind my eyes. The house felt different when I walked through the door, heavier, colder, no longer merely unsettling but actively menacing. I set my purse on the hall table, my hands shaking. I needed to think, to understand what this could possibly mean. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. That was when I saw him. He stood in the entryway near the coat rack, not by my bed this time. He was not still. His head tilted slightly. His dark eyes, which had always been so fixed, now moved, tracking me as I stood frozen. Then he took a single, deliberate step towards me. His lips, which had never moved before, parted. A whisper, dry and ancient, brushed against my ears. "Find me." The words echoed in the space around me, though no sound came from the boy himself. He simply stood there, having spoken, and then he was gone. He did not dissolve or fade. He simply was no longer present in the hallway. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding down to the floor, trying to catch my breath. My entire body trembled. Then I heard it. A click-clack sound came from somewhere near the living room, the distinct noise of a small plastic toy truck rolling across the bare floorboards. It rolled once, twice, a third time, then stopped. The boy did not return to my bedroom that night, or any night after. But the sound of that little red truck, a quiet, persistent reminder, played in my mind. It was a command that bound me to an impossible, terrifying quest, a truth I could not share, a task I could not ignore. The house no longer held a ghost. It held a terrifying demand. I spent my mornings before the bedroom mirror, twisting my head, seeking the best angle. My eyes searched my own face, noting the curve of my nose, the sharp line of my jaw. I smoothed my hair back, then let it fall, checking each change. I lingered, believing my features held a particular grace that others lacked. My mother would call out from the kitchen, her voice holding a slight edge, telling me breakfast was cold. I would rush out, but even at the table I found ways to catch my reflection in the dark window glass, seeing my image there. During school, I observed other boys, noting their appearances, finding fault in them, affirming my own preferred view of myself. One afternoon, Liam, my friend, and I walked home from school. He talked about Maya from our class. "Maya's hair is incredible today," he said, "and she has such pretty eyes." He then added, "She really has a great face." A knot tightened in my stomach. I waited for him to say something about me. He said nothing. He just kept talking about Maya. The words echoed, a sudden cold realization that he had not considered me. The casual praise for someone else felt like a direct dismissal. That night, I stared at my reflection, seeing only flaws. The clear lines of my face now seemed wrong. The perceived flaws kept me awake. My mind replayed Liam's words, turning my features into distortions. I tossed in bed, unable to find rest. Eventually, I rose and walked towards the washroom, needing a glass of water. My path led me directly before the wall mirror. I saw my image there. My face looked tired and my eyes held a familiar anxiety. Then, my reflection moved on its own. It tightened its lips, and a cruel smirk spread across its mouth. My eyes narrowed, and a cold gaze filled them, assessing. "You're truly quite ugly," it whispered, its voice sounding like my own, yet sharper and meaner. A sudden terror seized me. I stared at the mirror, my heart thudding against my ribs. The reflection lifted a hand, waving, a detached gesture of dismissal. I pulled back from the glass. This could not be real. This must be a dream. I ran from the washroom, scrambling back into bed, pulling the covers high over my head. The darkness offered little comfort, but I told myself this whole event was nothing more than a nightmare. The darkness offered little comfort, but I told myself this whole event was nothing more than a nightmare. I pulled the covers higher, pressing my face into the pillow, willing sleep to take me. But then a breath of air, cold and sharp, brushed my ear. A whisper slithered into the room, so soft I almost dismissed it. "Ugly." The word repeated, a delicate brushing sound coming from every corner, every shadow. Ugly. 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 It grew in intensity, tightening its hold on my mind. My eyes snapped open. The room held a dim glow from the streetlights outside. Then I saw them. The small glass face of the alarm clock showed my face, distorted and sneering. The smooth surface of my lamp, usually reflecting nothing but the room, now held my image, its mouth twisted into a snarl. The window pane, a large rectangle of glass, contained a dozen of my faces, each one leering back at me. They all moved in unison, their lips forming the single dreadful word. Ugly. 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 The sound swelled into a chorus, an inescapable chant filling my ears, vibrating through my bones. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm. Terror seized me, a cold grip around my throat. I could not breathe. A raw scream ripped from my throat. I scrambled from the bed, my feet hitting the floor with a desperate thud. I charged across the room, my focus locked on the large wall mirror, the one where it all began. I ran directly at it, my fist raised, ready to shatter the glass, ready to shatter every single mocking reflection. I roared my defiance against the chorus of loathing. I roared my defiance against the chorus of loathing. My fist shot out, aimed for the wall mirror. Just as my knuckles neared the glass, a hand reached from within the mirror. It was my hand. Its grip was impossibly strong. It seized my arm. A violent tug pulled me forward. The glass rippled around my arm. I felt a cold pressure. The mirror's surface gave way. It swallowed me whole. My body passed through the shimmering barrier. I landed hard on a cold surface. The air smelled stale. No light existed in this space. No sound existed. Only my harsh breath echoed. I stood in a desolate. It stretched forever. I turned quickly. The mirror stood behind me. It was now a solid wall. My doppelganger stood in my room, visible through the glass. Its face showed a cruel smile. Its eyes glittered with amusement. A chilling laugh erupted from its throat. The sound was distinct. It bounced off the impenetrable glass. My doppelganger raised a hand. It waved goodbye. I stood alone. The void surrounded me. The mirror was my prison wall. This was my new reality. It was a nightmare. There was no escape.